Well, greetings out there in YouTube land, and welcome to today's video extravaganza, in which we will open this box, although it's already partially been opened by the carrier, see what's inside, try to figure out what's wrong with it, and try to fix it. If you've read the video title, you already know something I don't know, and that is what's inside here, okay? I have left the box unopened so that I can make a brief point. And that point is, when you ship amps, you really need to double box them, okay? Now, there is no packing material on either side here, and as you can see, the box broke open probably because it collapsed from the weight put on top of it, and it looks to me like a Fender amp head of some sort, and let's hope it wasn't damaged by its exposure. And also, please remember, when you do ship them, show them the respect to double box them and pad them thoroughly. God knows these things have suffered enough over the years without us adding to it. Now, I'm really not picking on the sender of this amp, but I just want to use this as an example to make a good point, I think, and that is, we see here that there's all sorts of padding on top. I assume this is going to be the tubes, and here's the amp, but you see there is no protection on three sides of the amplifier cabinet, and you know that's where the attack's going to come from, okay? The weakest point, and sure enough, there it is. And all it would have taken for the box to completely break open and this thing fall out is that tiny little bit right there of tape and cardboard. So let's not belabor the point, let's just move on with seeing what we got and what we can do to help it. Well, here's the jewel that was lurking in that damaged box. I'm glad to report that it arrived unscathed. It's in really good shape. It appears to me to be a 1967 Fender Bandmaster AB763 circuit. We'll see more when I take it apart and look inside. I've started requesting that people sending me amps include just a brief statement of what it is that's wrong with the amp, because I want to make sure that I pay attention to those shortcomings. Sometimes, you know, the thing might not act up for me here where it does at home, and I want to be sure that nothing gets by me. Looking at the letter, the controls are noisy, so that's the typical pot cleaning. Normal channels produce a not so nice buzz, okay, so we'll be looking for noise in the normal channel. Vibrato channels a little more quiet, we'll double check that. The speed control on the tremolo seems to work fine, but the intensity does not produce much tremolo until about 4 or 5. So we get a weak tremolo, a buzz on the normal channel, noisy controls. Also, we're going to, of course, double check everything that's going on in here and replace capacitors, resistors as needed, and bias the output tubes. So with that understanding, let's get started. External examination is that it's in virtually flawless condition. Absolutely beautiful. Okay, I don't know that you could ask for better cosmetic condition than this on a 1967 amplifier. Okay, let's turn it around and take a look at the back. And the rear is every bit as nice as the front, with a intact, about perfect back door panel. We see that the rear control panel is an excellent. The 5-digit serial number begins with A2, so this is a 1967 Fender Bandmaster. Very much like a Bassman, but with a tremolo. Okay, so let's go ahead and pull the back door and the chassis and get started. Before I do, I want to draw your attention to a recent acquisition. I liked my Mastech MS8268 so much that I bought a second one, okay, just now on eBay. They're around $40 delivered, and I just love these. And I needed 2 of them because, you know, when you're doing a winding ratio on an output transformer, you have to be monitoring voltage in and voltage out. now I have a good accurate way to do that. Okay, I highly recommend these. People ask me all the time for recommendations on equipment, and I think this is about all the digital multimeter that most people need. You can spend a whole lot more for fluke equipment, and it's wonderful, but you really don't need to, okay, once you're getting started. So there they are, and we'll probably see them in use before the video is over. Well, the back is off. Everything looks in really good shape inside. We have a newly installed 3-wire power cord. The owner has asked me to double check the work that was done on that installation. We will do so. We also look in here and see the leaning transformer of Pisa, which many times is due to the amp being dropped on one end, and through the relentless pull of gravity on those heavy transformers, they actually bend the chassis or their little metal feet and tilt. This one, however, is flapping in the breeze, as we say in the amp biz, and we're going to have to take a look at that. Hopefully it's not a replacement. Looks original. Looking over here at the tube chart, we see that at the bottom it's a QD, which would be, what, 4th month of 67. So it's April of 1967. That would be 20 years after I was born. Looking in here at the tube chart, and it does say it's an AB763, but as we know from bitter experience, sometimes those tube charts were just what was handy and not necessarily what was accurate. Okay, so let's go ahead and pull the chassis. Also, we see those nuts and bolts on the floor of the cabinet, which are to secure those special clamps that will lock this head cabinet onto the Bandmaster speaker cabinet. Okay, now let's take a look at the chassis. We haven't put out a video in a few weeks, and I wanted to thank all the viewers that inquired as to my health status. I know it was kind of mean to keep you in the dark for all that time when there's some epidemic raging in the streets, but I couldn't be in better health, okay? I do appreciate the concern, but we took some time off to work on a hot rod, and I'll share that with you at the end of this video. But now let's get to work. And it looks like work is going to be very, very pleasant. Okay, this is the AmpTech's dream come true. It appears to be almost completely unmolested and original with that type of wiring that I emphasize for the tube filaments that twist tightly, rises above the socket, and then plunges down to make contact, rises, and does not wrap around the base of the tube socket, creating an electromagnetic interference that can produce some hum. Blue molded caps. We've got the old original cathode bypass caps, which are always a good idea to replace. As far as the blue molded caps, I'm not so sure. We'll see how they turn out. We'll also have to check on the status of the filter caps that are underneath the doghouse on the other side. You can see where that new 3-wire power cord has been installed. I'll probably go back and resolder some of these connections and make sure that the black wire goes through both the fuse and the on-off switch and bypasses the polarity switch, which can only cause trouble. All right, looks like we're in good shape here. I'm really pleased. We've got our a bias pot here, which will help us when we set the bias of those 6L6s. I'll probably change out that puny little diode there in our dedicated negative DC power supply for our biasing of the tubes. But everything looks really nice here. Let's flip it over and take a look in the doghouse. Next, let's double check that these transformers are original. It's tempting to think that this is a replacement because it's loose and all, but let's double check that, okay? We're going to look here at the transformer part number. This is not a Fender number. This is the transformer number, 022814. Well, I compared that to Fender part numbers, that's 125 P7D, and that is exactly what should be in this chassis. The X suffix is for the export model. Next here we have 022699, which translates to 125 C1A, and we see that that's the correct filter choke. And last but not least, that somewhat questionable output transformer 022848, and we see that's 125A6A. It's a 40 watt output transformer, and that is the correct part number. So it would appear that these are most likely the original 3 transformers, and if not, they've been properly replaced with the exact duplicate replacement that should have been installed. I'm going to go on record as saying I think from the looks of the state of this chassis that those are probably original. Next, let's take a look at the doghouse caps. Okay, we see the original old Mallory 20 microfarad at 500 volt filter caps, and these should probably be replaced. I'll contact the owner, but it would only be prudent on an older circuit like this. And then we see that rather unusual way that Fender wires its that first or reservoir capacitor. Since the inrush current on a big amplifier like this can go way above 500 volts, it's desirable to put reservoir caps with a voltage capacity of, say, up around 700 volts, but those are hard to buy, okay, and they might be too large to go in the doghouse. So Fender came up with a nice way to circumvent that problem by putting 2 70 microfarad caps at 350 volts. Now that seems counterintuitive, but when they're in series like this, head to tail, as you see right here in the schematic, they're in series and strapped with 220K resistors to be sure that the voltage is spread evenly between them. But one of the odd things about capacitors is when they're in series, the capacitance is cut in half. So this amounts to 35 microfarads, but the voltage adds. So it's 35 microfarads at 700 volts through 2 fairly easily obtained, inexpensive filter caps. Okay, so that's why they do it. And you have to be sure that they are strapped so that one of them doesn't face 600 volts and the other face 100, because that would far exceed what the 350 capacity is of either individual cap. And the strapping resistors are nestled down there safely in the little valley between the caps. Okay, I've made a list of all the parts I need to order for this repair. So I'm going to go in to the computer, order them from Antique Electronics Supply, and then wait by the mailbox for their arrival. I'll see you in just a few seconds. I'm back, and here, as if by magic, are the parts from Antique Electronics Supply. Let's get them out and let's get started recapping this circuit. Let's start off with these pesky old cathode bypass caps. They're 25 microfarads at 25 volts. Each of these is a double, so there's 4 total. We're going to replace them with 25 microfarad at 50 volt just to play it safe. Okay, here are the new cathode bypass caps installed. The positive side toward the circuit, negative end toward ground in both cases. Now let's change out the diode and filter cap here for the negative DC bias supply for our output tube grids, making sure that we take note of the fact that the band on the diode is here toward the center and the positive end of the electrolytic is to the left. In both cases then, band and positive are to the left side. Okay, we've got a much larger, stouter diode installed here with the band on the left, just like the original, and we have a 50 microfarad at 50 volt electrolytic filter cap installed with the positive side to the left, just like the original. Next, let's replace those 470 ohm screen resistors, which are always subjected to a lot of heat and are generally like about 10 or 20% high on the tolerance. So I'm going to use metal film resistors, which are a bunch more stable and precise. And also, while we're at it, those 1500 ohm grid stoppers are generally way out of spec. Look at that, almost double. Okay, here looking on the schematic, those are the little grid stoppers, the 1500 ohm, and there are the screen resistors that we have already replaced. Notice they're rated at 1 watt, whereas the grid stoppers, which face very, very low voltage, can just be half-watt resistors. And again, for the grid stoppers, I'm going to use, in this case, a 1 watt metal film resistor, but you see the precision that you get from these. It's supposed to be 1500 ohms. It's within, what, 3 ohms of being exactly right. So now it's time to install them. Okay, now both of the screen resistors and the grid stopper resistors have been installed. Let's stop for a second and discuss the purpose of them. Okay, the grid stoppers are mainly to prevent any sort of oscillation. And since you never know when oscillation is going to begin, you put them as close as you can to the grid of the tube. And in this case, I leave them in the center with a very short lead to the grid pin. Okay, now the screen resistors really serve a couple purposes. I put them out of the heat out here. They don't have to be that close to the screen to function properly, but they serve 2 good purposes. Number one, you'll almost only see them in amp circuits that have filter chokes. And as we all know, the Fender Bandmaster does have a large filter choke, marked here TR2 on the schematic, and you see that after the filter choke then will come up here to feed the screens. The DC resistance of most filter chokes is actually rather low, so you supplement it with the 470 ohm resistors at the screen, and these resistors can be looked at as sacrificial, and by that I mean if a short develops in the tube, these resistors will burn up before the tube itself or the wiring is subjected to tremendous heat. So they're almost like built-in fuses. Okay, so you can see there are 2 good purposes. If you'd like to hear some more detail on this subject, I have posted videos that cover the specifics of each of the types of resistor and capacitor in an amp circuit. Let's take a quick look here at the owner's letter to see if we've covered most of the problems. Power cord has been reinstalled. We said the controls are noisy. I haven't cleaned them yet, but I will. The normal channel has a buzz. The vibrato channel, not so much of a buzz. I believe that when we flip this over and do the filter caps in the doghouse, we're going to solve that problem. And then finally, after we get that going and get our output tubes properly biased, then we'll start looking at the tremolo and see if the intensity cannot be boosted a bit. I apologize for the noise in the background, but this time it's my own yard man making noise, so I guess I can be a little more tolerant. Alright, we've got the doghouse open. We're going to replace these 3 Mallory 20 at 500 caps, and then the 2 70 at 350 caps that are in series to make the single reservoir cap, which is 35 microfarads at 700 volts. I no longer am trying to push owners into paying for the Sprague Atom caps because I think they're overpriced. I don't think they're any better than any other capacitors, and there's no reason for them to cost 4 times as much. So we're going to be using some more moderately priced caps to do this job. Okay, all 3 of them have either been unsoldered or clipped. They're ready to remove. We notice that the positive side or end of the capacitors are facing the resistors. Also, while they're out, we're going to test these resistors to see if they're within spec. I'll be kind of surprised if they are, but we'll chuck them anyway. Sure enough, the 4.7K resistor is at least 10% out. It's at 5.21, and the 1000 is also more than 10% out. So I'm going to replace them both with some nice metal film resistors that can withstand heat and maintain precision. All the doghouse filter caps have been replaced with the proper polarity for these are actually 22s instead of 20 at 500 volts, positive end toward the resistors, and I'm using F&T filter caps. I find them to be wonderful quality, very good quality at a very reasonable price. From now on, these will be the ones that I prefer. Because the 70 at 350 caps in series are kind of hard to get, I went with 100 microfarad at 450, so we're going to end up then with a net of 50 microfarads at 900 volts. This is a little higher than the original reservoir cap, but because this circuit is diode rectified, not tube rectified, you can get away with going a little high on the filter cap values as far as the capacitance. So I've done that, and I think these are going to work just fine. Also, make sure that your soldering is sort of like those Hershey Kisses, where they're fat at the bottom and they come up to a point at the top, and that point then will come right up here along the wire and tend to hold the capacitor lead very snugly. Alright, I have straightened and secured the transformers so they're vertical, and now it's time to plug in some tubes, check the output tube bias, and then try to strengthen the tremolo. Here we see Jack on the back porch taking a nap atop his favorite stepladder on his favorite bath mat. Okay, good boy, Jack. Your fans want to see how you're doing, how you spend your day. Okay, you going to say hello? Huh? No, I guess not. Jack is a cat of few words. Casey, on the other hand, likes to sleep on the chair in my office right in front of my roll-top desk, okay, where she snoozes the day away and grooms. Say hi to the folks, Casey. You a good girl? Huh? Good girl. Alright, the tubes are all installed, and I must say this may be the best, nicest tube set I've ever seen in a vintage Fender amp. They're all either Mullards or RCAs. They're in beautiful shape. So I have high hopes for the tone that we're going to get from this jewel. I have the two bias probes in place beneath the 6L6GCs. We're plugged into the current limiter and to the shop's 12-inch 8-ohm speaker. So let's turn it on and see what we get. Alright, I let it warm up, took it off a standby. I'm injecting a 400 cycle per second tone into the normal channel, and it's coming through loud and clear. No buzz, no fuzz, no problems. Treble and bass both seem to have a fairly noticeable effect. Now let's try it in the vibrato channel. Okay, here we are in the vibrato channel. Loud and clear. Treble, bass have similar effects. Just for fun, let's see if we can get any tremolo. I'm not hearing much, are you? Well, of course we have no tremolo because we haven't yet plugged in our little shorting plug into our tremolo pedal socket here on the back of the amp. Okay, now let's see if we can get a little tremolo. Turn up our volume. Let's run our intensity up. It's at 0. Let's go 1, 2. I can hear it. It's really not that weak. All the way up to 10. Remember the markers down here. Speed. I got to tell you, that sounds pretty good to me. Well, looking at the output tube bias, you can see that the plate voltage is relatively high, the plate current is very low. Reason for that is that the negative DC bias supply circuit was overhauled with a brand new diode and filter capacitor, so now its output is much greater than it was, and it's essentially shutting the tubes down. So let's put our screwdriver into the bias adjustment pot and crank up that plate current until we get around, let's say around 18 watts of plate dissipation. Recall that 606 GCs, the maximum is 30 watts. But since this is a fixed bias circuit with the grounded cathodes, we'll go at about, let's say 60% of max. So that's going to be at around 18. Okay, so let's see. How about right about there? Let's let it stabilize and then multiply it out and see what plate dissipations we've got. Well, here are the results, and I think they look great. The tubes are very well matched. It's only like 0.6 milliamps between them. The plate dissipation 17.5 and 17.7 watts. Safely under the maximum, and there's just no reason to run this at the maximum. The owner can crank up the plate dissipation if he wants, but this is the way I feel more comfortable with it, like this. Okay, so I think our work here is done, other than maybe strengthening the tremolo a tiny bit. Let's take a look at that, and then it's time to see how it sounds with Holley and Jack strumming a few tunes through it. Okay, I'm looking at the tremolo circuit here. Now, one thing to keep in mind, both of the triodes in the oscillator circuit are cathode bypassed. And remember that we changed out that 25 at 25 microfarad bypass cap. There were 4 of them that we changed out, 2 for the amplifying circuit and 2 here for the tremolo circuit. Now, let's take a look at the ESR values for the original bypass caps that were in the circuit. Okay, this is typical 3.2 to 3.3. Okay, that's in ohms. Now let's see what the ESR value is for the bypass cap that was installed. Because frankly, I don't know if that's a good value or not. So let's see what a good value is. And we see that an optimum value for a new 25 microfarad cap is 0.41, and that's what, 1/8 of what the ESR value is for the caps that were in place. So I have a feeling that the tremolo is now working as it should, simply because of the replacement of those 2 bypass caps. Okay, I will see while we're doing the audio demonstration, but I honestly don't think that the tremolo circuit, and that's it right there, there are the 3 little oscillator loop caps, I really don't see why it needs any modification. It sounds to me like it works pretty well, but we'll see, like I said, during the audio demo. Also, why don't we check the value of the cathode bias resistors for each of the cathodes of our oscillator 12AX7. We saw in the schematic that it was supposed to be 2700 ohms, and we see that it is almost 3300 ohms. So the higher the cathode bias resistor value, the cooler the bias on the tube. So this has actually sort of cooled the tube down a little bit, which might reduce its gain. So let's replace this resistor for sure, and then let's check the other resistor to see if it needs to be replaced. The second resistor is 100K. What a stark difference in cathode biasing here. So let's take a look at the value of this resistor in the circuit. And strangely enough, the value of that 100K bias resistor is perfectly correct. So we'll leave it in place and then simply change the value of the first one that we measured. And here we have our metal film replacement for the 2700 ohm resistor, and we see it's within 7 ohms of perfection. So let's install it. And there we have the new metal film 2700 ohm cathode bias resistor installed. Now, in anticipation of people asking, well, what else could you do to make the tremolo stronger? In this particular type of tremolo with the photoresistor here, there's not a lot more you can do. You need to check that your values on your 3 oscillator capacitors, that they are absolutely correct, and then optimize the gain of each of your 12AX7 stages by doing what I've done: test the bias resistors and test, but more likely replace the bypass caps. That way you're optimizing the circuit and making it work at the same level that it did when it was new. There's really no other shortcuts here to boost the output that I see or that are really practical. I think your best bet then is to go in and optimize what you've got and make it work like it used to and like it should. Well, the work is done on the mighty 1967 Fender Bandmaster. Now it's time to see how it sounds. Let's start off in the normal channel, volume at 2.5, treble and bass at 5. I'm going to set the camera in its tripod, and we'll have Holley and Jack play a few tunes for us. Now let's plug into the vibrato channel. Go about the same volume. Let's do treble and bass at 5. And of course the tremolo will be off for right now. Okay, let's see how this sounds. Also, before we start, I think it's worth noting that both channels are absolutely dead quiet. So there's no buzz and no fuzz and no 60 cycle or 120 cycle hum. So I really think we've got this circuit pretty well straightened out. Let's see now how the vibrato channel sounds. Now let's try the vibrato channel, but with the tremolo on to a speed of 4 and an intensity of 6. Let's see if it's stout enough as it is, or if we really need to strengthen it. Well, speaking as an old tremolo hound, I have to say that this one works just fine. I don't see any reason to try to strengthen it, even at a setting of 6. It was very strong, very noticeable, so I'm going to leave it alone. Well, I guess that's about it for this video on the mighty 1967 Fender Bandmaster amp. Okay, it did not fight, it cooperated. This is the way amps are supposed to work with you when you're trying to repair them. You know, I've had a string of, I don't know what, 8 or 10 absolute nightmares, and I think I was way overdue to get a good one. Okay, and as far as I'm concerned, that's a good one. So I hope you enjoyed the fairly straightforward repair and the audio test, and that you will stay tuned for our second feature video. But first, I want to give my traditional thanks to all my Patreon patrons and PayPal contributors for keeping us on the air and advertising free for another month. If you would like to join them, I'll put links in the video description to help you to do so. I want to say thanks again from both me, Holley, Jack, and Casey for all the very generous gifts that have been sent to us by viewers. And now I'd like to invite you to join us for our part 2 video. If you remember, in the video immediately before this one, I showed you how I installed a tunnel ram and 2 4-barrel carburetors on the 1934 Ford truck, and I promised that we'd take a ride. Well, we're going to. So get on your helmet and get your seatbelt ready, because we're going to go for a little cruise in the countryside in the 1934 Ford pickup. As promised, we're going to go for a ride in the 34 Ford pickup with the newly installed tunnel ram. I've got the tripod securely anchored in the passenger side area, so I'll put the camera on there and we're going to go for a little spin. Okay, let's start it up. Flip on the fuel pump, the ignition. Easier to start than you expected, huh? across the silvery Rio Grande. Yes, sir. Home sweet home. Well, looks like we made it home in one piece. Thought I'd do a quick walk around here of the car we were riding in. Kind of a small bed. We can't get all of our quarantine groceries in there, all our toilet paper. Yellow tinted windows, just like they did in the old days. Bomber seats. I think it's a 57 Plymouth steering wheel, we decided. I got some new handles. Thought they were really pretty. So that's it. Hope you enjoyed it. And I hope you'll stay tuned for future videos and other surprises. Thanks for watching. Bye for now. I'm really proud of this cactus. Remember back many videos and months ago, I took you all for a ride out in the Jeep in the desert, and I picked up just this, oh damn it, something bite my knee.